Variety has just posted an article where it details some of the behind-the-scenes drama that went on with the Snow White movie. It says, inside Disney's Snow White fiasco, death threats, beefed up security, and a social media guru for Rachel Zegler. Clearly this movie is going to be a flop. Disney do not have faith in it, so that is why they've allowed this article to be released. And Variety is doing some digging and starting to point some fingers. And there'll be something very interesting about this article, because you'll notice there is one person that they are pointing fingers at, and the other that they are doing their best to defend. So let's read the article and then I'll tell you what I think. So it says, on August 12th, 2024, 3 days after Rachel Zegler hit the stage at Disney's D23 fan event to introduce the first official trailer of Snow White, she thanked supporters effusively in an X post for driving the teaser to 120 million views in 24 hours. 1 minute later, she added an afterthought in the same thread, which read, "And always remember Free Palestine." That addendum, which amassed 8.8 million views, nearly 4 times the number for the initial post, quickly made the rounds, with many inside the studio expressing shock that the Snow White star would commingle the promotion of its $270 million tentpole with any kind of political statement. Now, I want to stop there. Do you see how shocked they are acting that one of their actors has actually given a political statement alongside the release of their movie? That's the weird part, because this is Hollywood. Over the last several years, actors, producers, writers, directors, they've all been giving political statements. But Rachel Zegler speaks one word of Palestine and all of a sudden they are shocked that she's giving a political statement. That part stood out to me. I was like, that is wrong. They are criticizing her for something that all of them are guilty of doing. They are all guilty of picking something that they want to talk about on the political spectrum and addressing it or bringing it up during the release of their movies. And for them to say that they are shocked by this is bullshit. It really is. So I am going to call bullshit on that they were shocked. They just didn't like that she was talking about Palestine. A Disney executive raised the studio's concerns with Zegler's team, while the film's producer, Mark Platt, flew to New York to speak directly with her, which basically meant stop talking about Palestine. But the actress, whose relationship with the studio began to unravel in 2022 during a contentious West Side Story awards season campaign, and continued as she trashed the beloved original Snow White, stood her ground, and the post remained, meaning that she did not delete the post or edit it in any way, so she kept it up as it was with the Free Palestine. Behind the scenes, death threats towards Zegler's co-star Gal Gadot, who is Israeli, spiked, and Disney had to pay for additional security for the mother of 4. Now, this is something that I don't like that they have done, and this is not just Variety that are guilty of this, but all the media. Do you notice how they say Gal Gadot, who is a mother of 4? That is some very, deviously planted words, because you'll notice whenever it comes to Palestine, or mothers in Palestine, or children in Palestine, they never use wording like mother of 4. They never try to humanize them in that way. But compared to the actual Palestinians who have actually died, they've not just gotten death threats, they have gotten death threats by Israel, but they've also died and been murdered. They don't try to humanize them. But Gal Gadot, they're humanizing her for getting death threats, which, Hollywood actors always get. It's not as threatening as it used to be. But they're making it out like a bigger deal here than the people that are actually getting real death threats out in Palestine, and whose death threats have actually been followed up on and enacted. They don't act like it's a big deal there, but they're acting like it's a big deal here. So I noticed that. So that's one thing that the article just did. Another is that it is putting the blame of all this onto Rachel Zegler for saying Free Palestine in her tweet. She didn't understand the repercussions of her actions as far as what that meant for the film, for Gal, for anyone, says the insider. Now, that is nonsense. If she says Free Palestine, there is nothing wrong with that. People have always talked about causes. People talk about Ukraine all the time. So, that's never caused any controversy, so why is this? I'll tell you why. Because Gal Gadot has publicly been out there expressing her support for Israel and has basically been saying that they've been doing a great job, she commends them, all that kind of stuff. And when they have been out there doing all of these war crimes, Gal Gadot actually makes it out like they are the victims. And people have been mad at her about that. She did that once when they were throwing tear gas at a mosque. The Israelis started all that, and the Muslims in the mosque, they were just there praying. But she was making it out like, oh, my family is the one that's in danger and all that. Anytime the Israeli army have been doing stuff, and they've been caught on camera doing stuff, and people have called him out on it, she was there to basically gaslight other people and say, see, this is all anti-Semitic and everything. And that is the thing that rubbed people the wrong way. So when Rachel Zegler says Free Palestine, that does not put any hate on Gal Gadot. She already had all of that backlash. Because like I said, she was very vocal about this. This is not something that she was suddenly vocal about. She's always been vocal about this, and people have always been mad about it. So for this article to actually put all that blame onto Rachel Zegler is very disingenuous, and it is very sly. So that part, I don't put any of that blame onto Rachel Zegler. And them saying that she didn't understand the ramifications of it for the film and all that, it's like, what does that even mean? Because recently I watched Captain America Brave New World, and in that movie they had an Israeli character in there, and didn't Disney or Marvel understand the ramifications of their actions for including that character? So, very hypocritical this. The article continues, 3 months later, following the presidential election, Zegler posted F Donald Trump and made Trump supporters never know peace on Instagram. Disney had had enough. And again, it's like, how many actors have openly badmouthed Trump? But now that Trump is actually in power and is actually giving Israelis power and giving them weapons and is basically empowering Israel to go out and continue their genocide on Palestine, all of a sudden now it says, after that, Disney has had enough. Like I said, Hollywood actors have always been criticizing Trump, but now that Trump is actually supporting Israel, now supporting Trump is a problem and Disney have had enough? So again, nonsense. Given that the star was signaling to half the potential audience of an already troubled film plagued by costly reshoots to stay home, Platt made the case again to Zegler. After a back and forth, she began working with a social media guru paid for by Disney to vet any posts before the film's March 21 bow. Disney declined comment, Zegler did not respond to a request for comment. So they were basically just trying to keep it quiet at this point. Now that the film's dismal opening weekend of $87 million worldwide is in the rearview mirror, Burbank brass are evaluating what went wrong. To put Snow White's global box office haul into perspective, it's about $34 million less than Warner Bros.' Joker Folie à Deux in October, but with a bigger budget by $70 million. Well, they wouldn't have to pay that $70 million if Disney were not insistent on basically giving the middle finger to their beloved classic. So that $70 million, the only reason it cost an extra $70 million is because of all the reshoots they had to do due to their own incompetence and stupidity. So again, that's not something you can blame on Rachel Zegler, that's something you can blame on Disney, because remember, Zegler did not write the script. She did not have a hand in that. Disney were the ones that basically were gonna butcher their own classic. You can't say that a live-action remake of the most iconic film in the vault that cost $270 million and has been reshot multiple times, opening to $50 million, is okay. The math does not work. That movie should be $1 billion movie, said an executive at a rival studio when the film was tracking for a $45 million to $55 million domestic opening. Well, the reason it made less is not just because of that, but it's also because people are just sick and tired of Disney. Their hypocrisy, their double standards. Let's not forget that this other thing I'm going to bring up, Disney did all on their own. Do you remember when the live-action Mulan was released? And they basically shot their movie next to an Uyghur Muslim concentration camp in China. They did that all on their own. There was no actors, there was no Rachel Zegler. All that was on Disney. So they can try to pin the blame on Rachel Zegler, but remember, a lot of people are also pissed off at Disney. So they should also look at themselves in the mirror for that, because a lot of people weren't going to watch this movie purely because it had the Disney logo on it. The Disney-Zegler standoffs underscore the challenge Hollywood studios face as they attempt to rein in stars who caught controversy on social media. Again, many actors are guilty of this, but only now it becomes a problem for them. For her part, Gadot kept her comments on geopolitics limited to offering support for the civilian hostages taken during the October 7 Hamas attack, and did not mix that message with the promotion of the film. Isn't that what Melissa Barrera did? Except, unlike Gadot, she was being diplomatic, and she also did not conflate her message with the promotion of the film either, and she got fired from Scream 7 for it. But with Gal, they're acting like, that's all she did, she didn't do anything. And Jenna Ortega has confirmed that Melissa's firing is the reason she quit, not conflicting schedules, which we all knew Spyglass lied about. They grasped at a straw to save themselves the embarrassment, and now it's even more embarrassing.
She just told everyone your deepest, darkest secret. You must be so embarrassed.
Again, they are trying to say that Gal Gadot, she kept it limited to offering her support. She did a lot more than that. far more than Rachel Zegler just posting a single tweet saying free Palestine. But Gal Gadot, they aligned with her. Why do you think they gave such a phony actor like her the Hollywood star on the Walk of Fame? Not because of her acting abilities. There are many other actors that have not been given that award who do deserve it far more than her, but they gave it to her anyway. And the reason why is because they're sending a message out there. They're basically trying to say that these are the kinds of people that we're rewarding. You don't have to attach your message at the end of your movie to get people mad. If you just do it, people will get mad, and people are mad at Gal Gadot for exactly the reason that I mentioned. She's been very vocal on support for Israel, and she has not said anything about any of their crimes, including the murder of children. And keep in mind that Israel, they never honored the ceasefire. Even when it was on, I knew it was never going to stick because I knew they were going to do something to sabotage it. And even when the ceasefire started, they were still bombing innocents. So they never stuck to the agreement, which is why Hamas said no at the end. And then they said, see, they're not giving the hostages back. It's like, yeah, because you didn't want them to. That's why you kept doing bombings during the ceasefire period. And people know that they were playing dirty when it came to that ceasefire agreement, that it was all phony.
Hamas didn't make the Gaza ceasefire fall apart. Israel did. Israel started bombing the entire Gaza Strip last night, killing 400 people after they claimed that Hamas was refusing to release all the Israeli captives. That's why Hamas said it wouldn't release more hostages, not because they didn't want to negotiate, and it was actually Israel that effectively ended the negotiations by bombing the Gaza Strip last night. This is confirmed by the numerous reports from people involved in the negotiations that have said that Netanyahu is intentionally sabotaging the ceasefire talks.
And again, Gal Gadot supports that. She never said anything about the fact that Israel should actually stick to the deal or anything, so she supports in all of this, and then the ceasefire ended and Israel went completely all guns a-blazing, and that is why people were pissed off at Gal Gadot and Israel in general. And then very shortly after that, this movie comes out. So what did you think people were going to do? I think they were going to get less mad at Rachel Zegler at that point, and they were all going to focus their energy on boycotting the Snow White movie and not taking their kids to go see that. So this article is pointing a lot of fingers at Rachel Zegler, but timing-wise, I would say Gal Gadot is just as guilty, if not more, in terms of tanking this movie.
Palestinian-led BDS movement has called for a boycott of Snow White, which releases on March 21st, because it stars Gal Gadot in the role of Evil Queen. Gadot isn't just a former soldier in Israel's genocidal military who has spoken fondly of her time there. She's been an outspoken supporter of that military for years. And during Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza, Gadot has continued to promote its actions, even helping organize screenings of an Israeli military-produced propaganda film that tries to justify their crimes against 2.3 million Palestinians. Gadot's films are not boycotted simply because she's Israeli, but because she has actively served as a cultural ambassador for Israel's genocidal apartheid regime.
All that stuff that's going on, it just made a lot of people mad at Gal Gadot. That fact that she even supports that, and they don't want to go see a movie about someone who supports the death of children, as well as countless other innocents. So that is a big contributing factor that this article is not paying any attention towards. Months later at D23, she criticized the original 1937 Snow White, noting that the prince literally stalks the heroine. One top agent says that was the moment that Disney allowed Zegler to control the narrative. The first time she shoots her mouth off, you nip it in the bud. So what it sounds like to me is that that was a point where Disney says, okay Rachel, you can say what you want to say, like they let her control the narrative. And then she opened her mouth and said the stuff that just, did not work out, as we all know if you watch those interviews. They say all press is good press, but in Snow White's case, they were unabashedly wrong. Too much negative controversy surrounded the film for years, and it didn't help that the reviews were subpar, likely rendering this latest live-action adventure to Disney Plus for many potential ticket buyers. A possible saving grace? A feeble marketplace where Snow White could stay a while, as many family films have, despite the lackluster debut. You notice there it says it doesn't help that the reviews were subpar, and well, that's because Disney made a bad movie. A lot of Disney's movies have been bad lately, so that was more down to quality control on their part. Again, Rachel Zegler has nothing to do with the scripts. She's there to promote the movie that Disney gave the thumbs up to. So that's why I've always said, I've never been angry at Rachel Zegler for this. I've always been angry at Disney for this. So if you have any complaints about Snow White and the way it was treated, and the fact they weren't going to put the dwarves in there, you gotta 100% blame Disney for that, because that was not something on Rachel Zegler. She spoke ill of the original classic animated movie, yes, but who actually funded them to make that abomination that we were originally gonna get? That was all on Disney. And the fact that it says there, they say all press is good press, that kind of reinstates the fact of what we have all been saying, that when Disney always make these creative decisions that piss people off, they always look at it as, whatever, all press is good press, so it doesn't matter. They were wrong, and they've always been wrong. Look at what happened to Solo, a Star Wars movie after The Last Jedi pissed people off. So yeah, it comes down to make a good movie, but Disney don't seem to be doing that anymore, so... Many additional factors contribute to the film's woes, including a COVID-related production delay and a fire on set. While Disney always keeps trying to throw COVID in there, Matt Reeves, I keep saying this as an example, but Matt Reeves, he made the Batman during COVID, and they had to shoot 80% of the movie during COVID. Before COVID, they shot about 20% of the movie, if that, but he managed to shoot the rest of the movie during COVID, and they went through all kinds of issues. They had to keep shutting down and reopening their production, but in the end, you couldn't even tell that movie was made during a pandemic. That's how well they did it, and that movie cost nowhere near the kind of money that these Disney movies cost, and you don't see them complaining about COVID, so that COVID argument to me, it never held any water. Meanwhile, Disney's live-action movies, which were once reliable box office draws, have looked shakier in recent years, with the likes of Dumbo and Maleficent, Mistress of Evil bombing, and Peter Pan and Wendy getting shipped to Disney+. Well, Peter Pan and Wendy, I've said this before, out of curiosity, I went into Peter Pan and Wendy, watched about 10-15 minutes of it, and then I turned it off. And I was like, you know what? This was so bad, I actually want to go back and watch the original Peter Pan. So the original Peter Pan that I had not seen in like 20 years, that movie was so bad, it made me want to immediately put that on. So again, it talks to Disney's very bad quality control standards when it comes to their movies. Now this is where things get interesting. Still, there was no bad blood between the two Snow White leads, despite press reports to the contrary. Sources say the actresses got along well during production, and things only got awkward during the run-up to release. Case in point, Zegler referred to Gadot as a professional pageant queen in one Instagram reply that followed their joint appearance as presenters at the Oscars this month, considered a dismissive way to describe a fellow actress. Some observers say Disney fueled the perception of a feud by scheduling the actresses for separate events during junketing. At the March 15 premiere, which eschewed traditional red carpet interviews and opted for photos only, the two stars were mostly kept apart. Inside the El Capitan Theatre in Los Angeles, Zegler sat 2 rows ahead of Gadot and her family. Oh, that's really harsh. Gal Gadot's family had to actually watch her terrible singing in front of her. That must have been so hard. I mean, seriously, that is cruel.
Sounds hard. Really hard.
But by that point, Disney had given up hope that the film could overcome the backlash that had been brewing like a fairy tale cauldron for years. Okay, so this is something I want to talk about because the article says that the perceived feud between Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler was non-existent. But I don't buy that, because if the feud is non-existent, then those two actors would have been in interviews together. I have never seen a situation where the director and the lead actress are both doing an interview together. Usually, it's always the two lead actresses or the two lead actors. It's never the director and the actor. That will happen occasionally with the odd interview, but not the primary interviews. So this tells me that they did have a feud, but I don't think it's Rachel Zegler that had a problem with Gal Gadot. I actually think it's the other way around. Because if you read this article, what stands out is that this article is incredibly one-sided and blames Rachel Zegler for everything. This article literally should have said, "We are throwing Rachel Zegler under the bus," because everything this article does puts the blame on her, and it does not even consider anything that Gal Gadot has done as a potential reason for why people got mad. And because this article is very much pointing the finger at Rachel Zegler, I think it is covering for Gal Gadot. That's what the media has always been doing for people that are pro-Israel. It's always been covering for people that are pro-Israel and always trying to ignore or smear or villainize people that are pro-Palestinian. And I feel like that is exactly what this article is doing, but on a devious level. They are trying to maintain Gal Gadot's dignity because she is essentially under fire here. But they're trying to say, no, she's not the problem for this. It's Rachel Zegler, she's the problem.
It is the hyenas who are the real enemy. It was their fault. It was their idea.
But here's the thing. I think the reason that Gal Gadot is the issue here and not Rachel Zegler is that Rachel Zegler supports Palestine, and I think that is all it would take to get Gal Gadot pissed off. Because if you look at how Israelis react to people when they say Free Palestine or when they say anything kind about the civilians, they go off on one, they go berserk, they go rabid. And I feel like Gal Gadot actually went rabid once she saw Rachel Zegler post Free Palestine on that tweet that she did. And I bet you that was enough for Gal Gadot to say that she doesn't want to be anywhere near Rachel Zegler.
There's nothing we can do.
I don't care. She always does this. Just tell me what it costs to get her away from me.
And bear in mind, this wouldn't be the first time Gal Gadot has done that, because when the Palestine documentary won Best Documentary at the Oscars, Gal Gadot was supposed to present them with the Oscar, but she didn't show up there. Instead, Samuel Jackson and Selena Gomez presented the Oscar. But that tracks, that shows you how Gal Gadot acted to someone else who supported Palestine, and now her co-star supports it, and the two are not in the interviews, they're not seen together. That is not a coincidence. That right there, to me, makes me think that Gal Gadot is the one that got pissed off, but because she got pissed off, they can't point the finger at Rachel Zegler and say she's the problem. So rather than pointing the finger at Gal Gadot and say she's the one, they are doing what they always do for people that always talk about Israel. They always cover for them. And that's what I feel like this article is doing. This Variety article very much feels like it's pointing the finger at Rachel Zegler and covering for Gal Gadot and being like, what has she done? She's been very quiet during all this. Look, just because she doesn't say #Snow White after supporting Israel does not mean people can't naturally draw those lines themselves. They're not stupid, and that's what it feels like this article is doing. It feels like it's treating people as if they're idiots. But a lot of people know better. So that's what I think with the feud going on between those two. A lot of the stuff it says here about Rachel Zegler and how she had to get a social media guru and all that kind of stuff, that stuff is to be expected, and it is stuff that we have actually heard before about behind-the-scenes stories about how Rachel Zegler is being vetted and how she's being told how to conduct interviews better. And if you do look at the interviews that she's done since then, they actually are done a lot better than the interviews she did before. I mean, the fact that you can't see people clipping these newer interviews pretty much validates that. So yeah, this is a rather interesting article. It's not saying anything that we don't already know, but it does show that Hollywood is now trying to point the finger at Rachel Zegler. But the thing is, the people that you should always point the finger at is the studio. So they can point the finger at Rachel Zegler all they want. I think that if Disney actually respected their own movie, then Rachel Zegler would not have said all those things. She would have paid more respect to it as well. But because they were making a movie that essentially was meant to spit in the face of the original, they weren't going to have the dwarves in there at all. They were going to have those 7 hipsters. And also, as they said, she is not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love.
And if you'll notice, Gal Gadot is the first one to jump in there and say, don't worry guys, like, she's not going to get saved by the prince. So that's something I've always wondered. Why is that people always point the finger at Rachel Zegler for that, when Gal Gadot was also bracing people like, yeah, don't worry, we hear you. We are not going to let the prince save her. It's like Gal Gadot very much fell into that same camp as Rachel Zegler did in that moment, something that they both had in common at that point. But again, the only reason they're promoting it like that is because Disney gave the green light to that kind of movie, and most likely behind closed doors, I wouldn't be surprised if Disney said very similar things, which is why Rachel Zegler felt like she could actually say those kinds of things as well. Because Disney, they are only progressive so long as it makes them money, and well, it's not making them money, so now they're slowly trying to back away from it. So yeah, bottom line, this article very much feels like it's meant to be pointing the finger at Rachel Zegler and covering up for Gal Gadot. Overall though, if you want to know who really is responsible for the flop of this movie, it really does come down to Disney, because Disney get to cast their actors, they are the ones that get to write the movies, they get to essentially say, yes, this is the version of the movie we want, and they greenlit that original version. The one where it got rid of the dwarves, even though the dwarves hold up their frickin' Disney buildings. I said this in my recent review for Snow White. Disney do not respect their own legacy. They're having very much an identity crisis, and they are trying to change these iconic franchises and say, yeah, you shouldn't like those, you should like these new ones. But yeah, basically, Disney have got no one to blame but themselves on this one. Look, I've said a lot of crap about Rachel Zegler. They are the ones that I blame at the end of the day, because like I said, the buck stops with them, and they could have stopped this, but no, they didn't.
You see this all the time at the level of the top producer, who, between them or separately, will make flop after flop after flop after flop. I'm not going to name them, but I know who they are. And they still get paid huge sums of money for for being in films that nobody wants to see. And producers make pictures out of which they take enormous sums of money. And the films, again, are not films people want to see. They're always going to blame somebody else. Always. Not their fault. No, you were the one who said, or whatever. And there's a word for that. It's called upward failure. You see it all the time.
But yeah, that's the article trying to cover up for this mess. One is a crime to pop culture, the other is a crime to humanity. One's a movie, the other's real life. If you like what I do here, then please do consider supporting me over on Patreon, as it really helps keep the channel going. Thanks very much for watching, everyone, and a big thanks to my patrons who really are helping support the channel. And be sure to give this video a thumbs up and click the subscribe button and the bell right next to it so you can stay up to date with all my future videos, including a versus video of Snow White with the original animated movie. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I really appreciate it, and I'll catch all of you very soon. Take care.